Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. And with that, would like to formally bring on our guest for today, Helene Rutledge, who is the co-founder and advisor at Mend. Helene, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Really great to talk with you today, Nina.
Thanks.
So I'll start by introducing myself. My career has been in the healthcare industry with roles like Global Head of Open Innovation at GSK and Head of Clinical Supplies for Phase 3B4 at Pfizer, VP of R&D at Nature's Bounty, now the Bountiful Company.
Wow.
And most recently, a serial entrepreneur, having co-founded two companies, and Mend, the most recent one of that, in the digital healthcare space.
That's incredible. That's quite an experience. I can imagine how all of these different roles that you have, given you so many great insights as you kind of embark on your entrepreneurial journeys. That's amazing. Well, I would love if you could kind of dive in and tell us a little bit more about Mend and really the solutions that's being offered to help improve kind of the quality of life for, I hear, folks, but also the planet.
Absolutely. So Mend started as a clinical nutrition company with doctor recommended products with real science. And that's really so much the credibility and the DNA of Mend as a company. And then we saw the need for a more holistic patient experience. So we created the Upgrade by Mend platform to provide multimodal care. And this is where the Mend Care team, which is made up of nurses and dietitians, provide human-first coaching and education to patients. And this improves compliance and outcomes along doctor-recommended care plans. So we're really excited because patients need support. And it's the type of thing where it's easy to use through SMS. And we have, seen great patient uptake and satisfaction with the solution.
That's amazing. And it's nice that you have, it seems like a very multidisciplinary team to kind of help support, all of these different services being offered.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. And I would love if you could kind of touch on really your past experience. I mean, that introduction where you were really talking about all of the work that you've done in I've heard pharmaceuticals and consumer health, all of these various industries. Is there any kind of lessons learned or insights that you have kind of gleaned from those experiences that you've been able to bring with you to Mend?
Sure, and actually you hit on a big one, really, which is the like cross-pollination of ideas and interdisciplinary mindset, like across multiple categories. And in all that time, I think that one of the things about innovation is that there's many, many different definitions. So the thing that like I've anchored on like throughout all my work has been that innovation isn't just about something new, it has to bring value. And the value really needs to be something you can quantify. And it doesn't have to be just new products or new solutions. It could be anywhere along the value chain. So some of the experiences that I've had is really focusing on whatever the idea is, making sure that the world wants it. And you can do that through consumer testing, through interaction with your users. But that feedback is really key in having a good innovation. And then the other thing is the timing has to be right. And this is particularly relevant for digital health. Because back when I was at GSK, I was the liaison with MIT Media Lab, and we were doing amazing work in like really ahead of its time work in connected health with devices and having hack fests. And the thing is that at the time, the smartphone adoption was not high enough really for, these products to be commercially viable. And also the regulatory environment was completely not accepting of having healthcare, in an environment where the security had not been like completely vetted. So there were ideas that were, let's say 15 years ahead of their time. But what's nice about that is in a rapidly changing world, you can have these ideas kind of on the back burner and, be ready when the time is right to launch them. So that's the second thing with innovation is being able to focus and, work in the tactical land, but always keep your eyes open on whatever else is happening in the landscape and adjusting your strategy when you see that moment, especially if there's something opportunistic, as the world changes. So, and you know, those things at MIT that we were missing was adoption of telemedicine, you know, even
Mhm.
acceptance of QR codes. Like I remember, you know, one of the sessions, people were confused about how to like get the QR code going, and now everyone uses them, and it's much to the
100%.
benefit.
That is what an astute observation. I think the beauty and like the need for timing. And I like how you're really talking about the importance of like being in the weeds, but also kind of having your pulse on what's ahead to make sure that you're kind of driving towards this environment. When you're talking about QR codes, like I just couldn't help but laugh because now it's restaurants, it's everywhere, it's so pervasive. So it
Mhm.
is kind of funny to see how a lot of these things are really ahead of its time.
For
That is so
sure.
funny to me. Well, and I also really wanted to touch on some of the sustainability measures that you've just kind of implemented and really utilized just in your career and your life. Are there any, projects or initiatives that where you've really implemented these sustainability measures in your career?
Sure. So, and again, just like innovation, sustainability has a lot of different definitions. And,
Mhm.
you know, one of the things that I've focused on is really understanding the stakeholders.
Right.
So for innovation in particular, like looking at who is your target and making sure that you have a lot of diverse people on the project team to give you those perspectives, but making those considerations of the multiple stakeholders of how your innovation is going to impact the world, and in particular, the unforeseen consequences. So I think that in order to have a sustainable mindset, it really takes systems thinking in terms of like where like your immediate need, but then the longer term impact. And that's, you know, something that I embrace after, you know, I have to give a shout out to Professor Gladwin when I was at Stern for my executive MBA, and he just really solidified those sustainable business, you know, guidelines that I've
Right.
kept in mind as I do innovation projects.
That's incredible. And I definitely can understand how being able to think broadly, being able to have like a larger systems or ecosystem view really helps you when you're thinking not only in the present, but also, how this is going to grow and what it's going to look like. That is pretty cool. And I also know that you have been a part of Hit Lab's Breakthrough One. Would love if you could share a little bit more about, the what that experience was like and how it's been able to, impact, or if it's kind of how it's been able to influence some of the things that you've done in your career.
Sure. I really appreciate HitLab's mission because, like I was just saying, working with a variety of stakeholders is the important part, that it's both private and public sector, and
Mhm.
just bringing out studies and programs to improve healthcare access and delivery. So it's so aligned with the, you know, the way I look at business. But I think that, you know, one of the things, and yeah, I also did coursework at Columbia Business School, is the concept of eliminating bias. And as we get more and more into AI and, you know, training models and making sure that, you know, there's mindfulness in terms of what data we're training these models on, like that's something that I think like HitLab raises these issues in a way, you know, that we can all work on that together to improve equity and access for healthcare in the wider system.
That's amazing. And I like that you kind of mentioned, some of these new things that are happening in the space, like AI, and really the considerations that are needed. Kind of on that lens, I'm just so curious, like you have had, an extensive career in pharmaceutical, in consumer health, and all of these areas. What are kind of the more significant like trends or changes or evolutions? Like what kind of, as someone that's really been entrenched in the space, what are some of the interesting things that you've just seen evolve over time?
So I know everybody always talks about the pace of change being so rapid, and the only constant is that change is going to happen. But I have to say, you know, it goes even back to like when you're in the industry before biotech was even big. So, you know,
Wow.
biotech, and then the globalization of clinical trials. So I was involved in that at Pfizer, like putting like a completely different mindset on, you know, how clinical trials are run. And I think that clinical trial innovation is really huge. And then, you know, I also mentioned the COVID acceleration of telemedicine and digital health. and the start of AI and ML. But one thing I'd like to focus on that is an important trend is patient centricity. And this is something that if you look at my cross-category experience, the consumerization of healthcare is an important patient trend, that patients feel like their healthcare should be just as easy as doing something on your smartphone or like e-commerce. And healthcare is absolutely the opposite of that. So, when it's such a burden to interact with the healthcare system, from the administrative and the costs and things like that, this is really an important area for healthcare to innovate and focus on. And it started way back when I was at GSK. The then CEO, Andrew Whitty, held like a future team session where like we looked at healthcare and we looked at all the changes that needed to be made and reducing the complexity and increasing education and understanding. And I just have to say that big companies find it so difficult to change. And some of that cross-category mindset is like looking at other industries that are closer to the consumer. So the analogy that I like to use is, because I was also a chief innovation officer at New Avon, is that when big beauty companies didn't have the innovation, they just went out and acquired indie beauty companies, because like those companies were the ones who really knew the consumers. Like they had that, constant interaction, that brand loyalty. And that's something that, since the big companies were not quick enough to achieve that themselves, they achieved it through acquisition. And I think as healthcare becomes more decentralized, you're going to see these smaller players that are adapting and innovating more rapidly and really disrupting the landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like it's favoring the scrappy, those that are kind of able to get in and really make an impact very quickly. I think that's a really interesting trend, and I think just consumer behavior in general. And I would imagine that with COVID and just all of these other social factors that are really influencing the fact that, because you're completely right. I mean, if it's so simple to get anything else in your life, why can't healthcare be the same? So I think if anything, it's an area that's ripe for opportunity.
Absolutely.
I love it. And also kind of wanted to ask you, just leveraging your experience and kind of the time that you've been in this industry throughout your career, are there any, specific achievements or projects or really anything that you just can speak to that you're really proud of, or that you're really passionate about when it comes to just, creating these science-based, but also patient-centered solutions that you had mentioned?
Sure. I think that what really changed is sort of the whole trajectory of how I think about things was launching the first startup, Upgrade, which I co-launched with Justin Kamine, because this was where just looking at big companies and how they were slower to change, but also seeing the consumer needs space for more natural solutions, for prevention-minded solutions, having agency and over personalizing their regimens and their care. So really finding that space that was in between, like a pharma or a drug solution and the supplement industry, which often does not have enough science behind the products. So for me, that was the most exciting thing, to see that there was this need to carve out this new category. And the fact that it was my first, start from scratch startup experience, and where you sort of have to use all of your skills and then leverage your ecosystem, to get things done. And the experience led us to see that from a direct to consumer alone, it was just too difficult to communicate all the science that you needed to communicate to patients. So that led to the merger with Mend and the development of the digital solution, which then provides that translation of science through the doctors and our nurses and nutritionists. And that's a much more effective way to reach people. So with the real science that would differentiate from, companies who are making claims that are not necessarily true. So I think that whole experience, I'm really excited about being able to lead with science, and like having that holistic experience for patients has been really powerful.
Absolutely. Wow, that's so fascinating. And what like a great observation where you were able to kind of notice like whether it's health literacy or just, I think, awareness, because I think as consumers, sometimes you can be bogged down with so much information. So kind of knowing to leverage different players like nutritionists or physicians that's a really great call. So that's really interesting that you were able to pivot in that way. I love that. Also kind of wanted to ask you if you could, as you, not only in your kind of career, but also during your work as an entrepreneur, if you could provide, any insights into any specific challenges that you've encountered in your career, if there's, anything that comes to mind in terms of just something a barrier that you've had or something that you've had to overcome, would love if you can share some of that knowledge with us.
Well, I think, if you look at the startup experience, every day a new challenge, right? So, so that has been, how do you keep things moving, like, and get around those roadblocks? So, so like that's one thing, but also in terms of sustainability, just the entire category has an issue with how do you balance the innovation and the environmental impact of things that we're doing to get products out on the market. And
Right.
like I think that has been like a theme also throughout, like all of consumer packaged goods. When you look at products that have to be in packages to protect their shelf life, but that's the opposite of being able to biodegrade in the environment. So like it's really, again, looking at how can you make impact in reducing waste. But there's always this balance that you have to have with, I mean, look at what happened in the pandemic with all the PPE that everyone needed to be protected, but then it created an enormous burden in terms of disposing of that material. So,
Right.
so I think that, balancing the need for innovation and the environmental impact has been a really difficult one. But I think it's something that, like, as we go towards more decentralized healthcare and inventory management and things like that, there's a lot of areas that that can be improved.
I love that. And I think just the awareness when you think about long-term sustainability, like implications, that in and of itself is such a win when folks are able to really kind of ask themselves that question and kind of start to take those steps that are needed to kind of at least plan for a more sustainable future. So the fact that you're even thinking about that already is incredible.
Mhm.
That's amazing. And I also wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit too about any advice that you have for, individuals, maybe folks that are listening in on this call that are interested in, being a part of the entrepreneurial space, either as a co-founder or as an advisor, any kind of words of wisdom or advice that you have just based on your own experiences with Mend.
So I think that comes into two areas. So if people are interested in becoming a founder of a startup, this is something really personal to me because most of my career was in the corporate world. And I'll go back to something someone said to me in an interview one time, which like was really interesting because in corporate jobs, there's two kinds of places. There's the traditional companies that there's a playbook. And the analogy is like if you're in a car and you get on the highway, it's so clear like where the exits are and what to do and the rules about changing lanes and like all that stuff in a traditional company. And then companies who were trying to infuse entrepreneurship, like the analogy is like, well, this is great. Now you have an SUV and you can drive over the barricade. And if there's something in your way, you don't have to follow all the rules. And that's really wonderful. And I think there are some, especially when we were at GSK and we were doing all these great innovative things, we were like, this is groundbreaking. This is not the traditional company. But I have to say, like, when you think about a startup, though, there's almost no analogy to the corporate world that isn't like, this is more like Naked and Afraid. Like you're dropped on an island. The only thing you have is your wits, like your instincts and your talents, and you hope there's some other good people on the island with you. And that it's so different. It's that different, really. So I think for people who want to found a startup or be in that environment, just make sure you know how different it is. And like one of the books that I read that was really helpful was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. So I read that like a couple of months after, co-founding Upgrade with my co-founder Justin, and it was really helpful. So, and then to your other point, like if you want to advise a startup, it's so important to make sure that the advice that you're giving is relevant to specifically what the startup is doing at that time. Like the context is everything.
Right.
Because, if the experience is different, the advice could potentially send the company in a different direction than where they were going. So, so those are just two observations in that area.
That's great to know. And that is an amazing analogy, talking about corporate versus being a founder. That's going to stick with me for some time. I think that's so funny. But it paints quite a picture. So that's great. I love that. I want to make sure that we get to some of the questions that we have from our audience. The first question that we have is, how is Mend taking advantage of the food as medicine movement?
Oh, excellent question. So, and that is a trend that's definitely rising because people are starting to acknowledge that lifestyle-based factors are so important in their overall health. So that is squarely in the work that Mend is doing to say, everyone's situation, and the example of surgery. So like when you go into surgery, if you're undernourished, your chances of a good outcome are greatly diminished. So Mend shines a spotlight on what is it in your diet that is missing that can't be provided by food alone. So functional nutrition means understanding, what your body is dealing with, and then having the right ingredients to set you up for success. And that's a big part of the ethos of Mend.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's definitely interesting and kind of amazing that there is kind of a broader, I think, cultural awareness around lifestyle factors around things like food and nutrition. So I think it's a trend that will benefit us all. Perfect. And we have another question from the audience that says, are there any health tech or digital health misconceptions that you've noticed? I think as more and more people are probably learning about digital health or kind of, in this space, that you have seen that you can clear up?
Well, it's definitely been a huge learning experience. And I want to say that being part of the HIT Lab community and learning from everyone else's experience has been really helpful, because I think that, some of the things that are operational that get in the way of startups are things that you wouldn't think. And like the misconception is if you have a really great solution or a platform and it does everything like to provide better outcomes, the friction to get that solution in place in the hands of doctors or hospitals is just as insurmountable as having a good technical solution. So I think that's something that is a watch out for digital health companies, that don't underestimate the difficulty of the operational elements when you're coming up with a technical solution.
I think that component is so huge, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think it is, a lot of these solutions don't really exist in a vacuum. You have to kind of play with a very sometimes slow moving, sometimes bureaucratic healthcare system. So I think I like that you're kind of calling out the need to really think through some of those operational components or challenges. That's great. And I also wanted to ask you, I mean, I think it's so incredible, not just your career, the work that you've done, the work that you're currently doing. For you, when you think about your future, are there any goals or aspirations that you have when you think about your future career endeavors, whether it's, at Mend or otherwise? And really just, is there kind of any impact that you're hoping to have, in this space?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that the biggest benefit that I get from things that I do is seeing the impact in people's lives. So for Mend, just seeing how it greatly improved the patient's experience, and testimonials where people say, I'm now living my best life. Like those types of things are just so rewarding that for everything that I do, I want to make sure that I'm making a difference for patients. But then also, if you look at how to extrapolate some of these solutions, I really think that the power of digital healthcare is if we can get the best practices and, learn how to digitize those, and that will increase access and democratize healthcare. So I want to continue to be part of that, health equity and access. And, there's a growing number of people who are looking at bringing the mission and the meaning. And I'll give a shout out to Mark Sadovic, who has a group called Leaders Who Care. And, I think that if we imagine a world where people know what their risk factors are and can tailor their lifestyle to lead their best life, that's the type of things that I want to contribute to, because there's so much focus on longevity, but it's like that's really not going to be valuable if you don't have a healthy life as you lead a longer life.
Yeah, it's quantity is important, but quality is also very, very important. That's beautiful. That's such a great, like, purpose driven. I could already like feel the passion as you're really thinking about like what these long-term and stable solutions look like for the future of just health in general. Also kind of wanted to ask you, for the space that you're in right now and really being involved in the industry, are there any particular like trends that you're food as medicine is like a great trend that's been kind of happening. Are there any other technology trends, cultural trends, things that you're kind of seeing kind of crop up in the broader healthcare or health tech space that you are excited about?
Yeah, I think that comes to what I was saying before about like, being really, really close to something, but then pulling your head up. And,
Totally.
I've been just trying to immerse myself in AI and ML and understanding the implications of that, because especially in healthcare, it's going to be so important. And you see the president just like released a statement on policy for AI. So I think that's a space that I'm watching really carefully, and very excited to see where it can take us.
That's amazing. I know we're about like a minute away, so just wanted to quickly ask you, wanted to learn a little bit more. You are in a lot of the spaces and roles that you've had also are leadership roles. So, for those folks that are, whether they're on the ground floor, they're kind of looking to build up a team, are there any words of wisdoms or strategies, principles that you have when it comes to like building a diverse and meaningful team?
Yeah, so I think that is so much about the stage of growth your company is in and the needs that you have, but also like looking at the like taking like a servant leadership mindset, that like trying to hire people who fit with the culture and that you can give loose direction to, and then they can actually like explore their expertise to give back to the company. So it's really it depends so much on where you are in the life cycle of a company, but all of those characteristics of bringing together a diverse team make your solutions so much stronger.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Helene, just dropping all of the words of wisdom for us. I think it's been such an incredible call. I really, really appreciate all of the amazing insights that you have. I can only see how, being able to leverage your wealth of knowledge and experience to now build something new and impactful and meaningful. I think it's just so amazing to see.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been fun talking with you today.
100%. I'm excited to kind of see how Mend continues to grow, and we'll definitely have to have you back for kind of a part 2 to learn more and kind of see how things are going.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.